The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast.
With 7 seconds to go. He missed it. Loose ball. Bridges has it. They got to go. It's Payne. Johnson for the win. Time. Cam Johnson with a stunner at the buzzer. Leaving the Knicks shot.
Welcome to The Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike. I'm here with Sam. Sam, how you doing?
You know what, Mike? I'm doing really, really well, given that the Suns lost today. We're recording immediately following what I would call one of the most riveting games of basketball I've watched all season, honestly, for the Suns, for any team. And just for a team that's only lost now 13 games this year. I know we don't do moral victories around here, but it was a really fun game of basketball to watch with way more positives to take away from it than negatives. What do you think?
Well, I would say that you're right in that we don't do moral victories, but I think when you get to the point where there's no Chris Paul, no Devin Booker, and no Cameron Johnson, who has essentially been the best player on the Suns since Chris Paul went out outside of Devin Booker, I'd say we're in moral victory territory.
Yeah.
I think you're at a point where it's like, all right, well, if we win, then that's awesome. And if we lose, but they do well against a good team, then that's actually a surprise. I think heading into this game, I was terrified of a blowout on national TV that I was going to have to sit through early in the day. Like, I've talked to you about this before, Sam, but early games are fun if the Suns win. But if they lose, then you're just sort of sitting there the rest of the day thinking about that loss. Mm-hmm. So it kind of sucks. So I was a little worried about a brutal game that we were going to have to watch in order to record this. And it ended up being a fun game where I think the Suns should have won probably. But they lost in a way where there were some incredibly difficult shots hit by Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday in the fourth quarter that sort of sealed it for the Bucks. And it's hard to get mad about that because the Suns really normally have guys that can match those difficult shots in Devin Booker, Chris Paul, and even Cameron Johnson of late, and they didn't have him this time, so it resulted in the Bucks win. So it's hard to be mad. I don't know. I'll be honest. Watching the last few minutes, yeah, maybe I was a little mad. Afterwards,
there were
not as much.
There were little things. I wouldn't say mad. I wasn't mad at any point in the game. It's just the fact that through 3 quarters they were still right there, and I wanted it so bad. Like I expected. They played a great first half. And I just thought to myself, all right, they can't keep it. They can't keep this up forever. The third quarter is where Milwaukee takes over. When Milwaukee didn't take over in the third quarter, I wanted it so bad. And so there were a few minutes where I wasn't mad, but I did roll my eyes at some stuff. That's really what it was. I will apologize. A few people have called me out for this. I think at one point during the game, not I think, because I know I did this. At one point during the game, I tweeted that Aaron Holiday was in a clear-cut fashion outplaying his older brother, which at the time he was. And then Drew sort of took over down the stretch. Chris Middleton, obviously, main storyline for Milwaukee with 44 points, but Drew hit big shots. One point in the fourth quarter, hit back-to-back step-back threes. And at that point, what the fuck can you do? Mm-hmm. Do you want to start offense or defense here? Because I think there's a lot to cover on both ends, honestly.
Well, you know what? I want to talk about the Knicks game because we haven't been able to. Okay. Can we just briefly touch on that?
No, we can. We can absolutely touch on the most fun basketball game of the entire season for the Suns, which we just happen to not get to so far because, hey, this was a fun weekend to be a Suns fan, I think. I think they really showed a lot on both nights. But
it's a long season. Look, first of all, it's a long season, right? 82 games is a long season. First time we're doing 82 games in a few years. And we'll be covering all 82 games. And this season, we've had the normal stretch, right? They lost a few games, and then they come out hot. Everyone's healthy. They're killing everyone. Frank Kaminsky has a week where he's the best player on the Suns, and we get to talk about Frank Kaminsky for a while. Jalen Smith has a week where he's really good on the Suns, and we get to talk about Jalen Smith for a while. Biyombo comes in, and the Suns stop losing games that Biyombo plays. We get to talk about Biyombo for a while. But this stretch by Cameron Johnson felt more like a star being born than any of that, because the ability that he has to scale his offense from the small amount of minutes and arguably the small amount of opportunities he's been given compared to a star to what he's done in the last 6 games. The Suns are 3-3. He played 5 of those games. What he's done in that time is average star numbers, like legitimate star numbers, 23.4 points per game on, this is insane, 11.6 field goal attempts per game. And in that time, 60% from the field, 58.5% from 3, 95.8% from the free throw line in 5 games. An absurd stretch of games by Cameron Johnson. And then, of course, hitting that game winner in a game where he was the main character throughout, starting with a potential injury to start the game. Just one of the most fun things that I've seen from this team so far this season, which is a surprise considering it's without their 2 best players.
By the way, quite a few people on Twitter, because I shared this, saw our reaction to that shot.
Yeah.
If you're not on Twitter, it's fine if you didn't see that reaction. But, I mean, I'm so glad we were able to capture that reaction. We did a playback stream on Friday, and so here's your plug for the week. We'll be continuing to do playback streams this Friday night and the following Friday night for patrons. But I was so glad that we were able to clip that specific reaction because you said it best. You said it best during it. Like, we're going to remember that for 40 years. We're going to remember that shot forever as Suns fans. It was one of the purest moments of joy that I can remember. And it really, so much of it stems from the lack of expectations going into games like these. You're down 12 in a fourth quarter like that against the Knicks, and you're thinking, you know, that this, we don't have Chris Paul, we don't have Devin Booker, and we just can't count on the level of offensive production out of these other guys. It's okay to, you know, this is where they're going to lie down, and we're going to have to hold an L. And for Cam to come back like that, didn't force anything, but had like the most Klay Thompson-esque performance of his career easily, just hitting 3 after 3 after 3.
Yeah.
Standstill threes, obviously catch and shoot, but also off movement catch and shoots that were much more difficult. We've seen him not just in the Knicks game, but in other games recently experiment with more difficult off the dribble threes. He's hit some nice step backs. In I think the game before that against Portland, he had a really nice step back in that game as well. He's been so good. You mentioned the 23 points per game. He also has 3 assists per game in those last 5 games to only 0.6 turnovers. It's continuing. A trend that I've talked about. The playmaking, I think, is really one of the biggest things that you can look at with this guy to give you the confidence of believing that he's not just, you know, an average type starter who scrapes 15 points per game, but that there actually is, you know, maybe I would say for the first time, 20 point per game potential here. The ceiling has been raised, I think. I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think the ceiling has absolutely been raised with Cam. You know, I still struggle. There are things that he just doesn't have in his bag that you need to have if you want to be like the consistent 20-plus points, 5-plus assists kind of play initiator who I kind of envision as, you know, like the second best player on a team. I still don't see that in Cam, and he's 26 years old. He just turned 26. But being like a close to 20 point per game, high level starter who just doesn't make mistakes on either end of the floor, that's definitely, I mean, we're right there. We're right there. It really feels like that could be who this guy is for the 4 or 5 year peak of his career, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we've gotten to the point with Cameron Johnson this season where it feels like the difference in the playoffs this year, the difference in all the way potentially to the NBA Finals, if this team stays healthy, the difference might be Cameron Johnson at this point. It might be that one extra guy stepping up and being able to score legitimately from 3 levels. Doesn't take a lot of mid-range shots because he doesn't have to. When you shoot that well from the 3-point line, those should be threes. And also his ability to attack off the dribble. We've talked about it many times now, but the passes that he's making under the rim have been incredibly nice. Even a few out to the 3-point line on some of the drives he's making, attacking the basket, getting to the free throw line. I mean, this is the type of thing that you need. 4.8 free throw attempts per game in that time. This is why he's so efficient. 11 shots, 23 points. That's absurd. That's an absurd true shooting percentage by Cameron Johnson. And then, the balls to shoot that final shot the way that he did, and like the whole time running down the court, the Suns secured the rebound. Shout out to Mikal Bridges, by the way, for getting that rebound. And then lining up around Cameron Payne to give him that line of sight on that pass. And then to recognize that he had the time and the space to take an extra dribble before shooting that shot. Everything about it was picture perfect, other than it being a bank shot. But when it's going your way, it's going your way at times. That's another way of saying it was a Klay Thompson-esque performance. It was like that. It almost, even in some weird way, because it was a national TV game, reminded me of like a Steph Curry type performance, like when Steph hit that game winner against OKC, where it's just what do you do against this guy when they're making every single shot, and then all of a sudden the ball's in his hands, no timeout, because the Suns had no timeouts. All of a sudden the ball's in his hands to win the game, and he won it. It was just an incredible time, and one of the most fun Suns games in a long time.
Speaking of Steph Curry, actually, or players within the realm of a Steph Curry comparison, because obviously I know you're not making a one-to-one comparison there between Cam Johnson and Steph Curry, but did you see the graphic also that said the only two players Cam joined Damian Lillard as the only other player to hit at least 9 threes in a game, and have a game-winning buzzer beater, or game-winning shot, I think it was. So yeah, just to be in the modern era, have a performance like that with Dame time as your only competition, so to speak. We said at the time, a career-defining moment for this guy, and a game that I think we might be able to look back on 5 years from now. Hopefully, Cam Johnson, by the way, is still a Sun 5 years from now. I think that needs to be said, because unfortunately the future is so up in the air, but I would love to look back 5 years from now and be able to clearly say that was the game that we all remember when it all changed. That was we had seen the flashes before then. We had seen the way he played with poise through the playoffs, the stellar moments, the dunk on PJ. He's had career highlights before, but like his career high up until this point was 24. And then he comes out in this game when they need him most with 38. I would love to be able to point back to it and say that was the inflection point. That's when everything changed for Cameron Johnson.
Yep, I agree. And it's going to be interesting to see what Monty does when this team is fully healthy again. I think that Jay Crowder is going to start again, even in that game where he had his best game of his career. He came off the bench. I think we can know that Jay Crowder is going to start there. But the question is, without starting, how does he find the minutes that Cameron Johnson so clearly has earned and so clearly deserves at this point? And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch for the rest of the season once they are fully healthy. Cameron Johnson missed, by the way, if you missed it, he missed the Bucks game due to a knee in the thigh that he took from Mitchell Robinson, which happened immediately after he came back after taking a shoulder to the sternum. So getting beat up out there as well. And, that knee to the thigh, it's not, first of all, that really hurts, and it's probably difficult to walk today, but that's not an injury that's going to keep him out too long, maybe a few games at the most. And it'll be nice to see him coming back,
I hope so. I don't know if you felt this same way. Like, we've poked fun at Julius Randle before as a player, I think.
Yeah. He's on the list now, yeah.
I mean, I've never, that's the thing though, I've never personally had an issue with Julius Randle other than thinking he's a little lazy as a player, but that's not the end of the world. I don't hate the guy. I just kind of thought, maybe he wasn't worthy of his contract, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything to speak about him personally. This game changed things. No, this game changed things.
He's on the list now.
He's on the list. Yep.
He's the Suns' enemy. He's an enemy of this team now. There's no way to really mince words on that, because it is what it is at this point. Not only did he drop a shoulder into Cameron Johnson after traveling and not get called for anything, and Cameron Johnson left, then of course he got ejected after shoving Cameron Johnson. By the way, I was desperate to figure out what Cameron Johnson said to him.
I don't know.
I watched it over and over again. I could not figure it out.
I don't think anyone ever said.
Yeah, I couldn't figure it out. I bet it was insane, extremely inflammatory, I imagine. And I would just love to hear that, because Cameron Johnson is such a nice guy, so I'd be curious to learn that. But then after the game, they asked Cameron Johnson about that, and he said, first of all, Cameron Johnson, very open. When you ask him a question, he's going to tell you exactly what he thinks. It's not, there's nothing to it as far as like this like PR speak or whatever. Like he doesn't do that. He just kind of gives.
Yeah, he's media trained though, right? Like he knows, because he even said in the quote that you're about to. So I'll let you get to it. But he even said that he didn't want to get in trouble. But
yeah,
he is,
of course,
he is.
right.
So he's filtering his message a little bit,
right.
But
he's not still, Russell Westbrook, is what you're saying, right?
Right, but he's not hiding anything. So
he's not going to get fined. But here's what I mean by that. I think is he said he didn't like what Julius Randle did, and then multiple times said it hurt. What Julius Randle did, it hurt. And I think I love Cameron Johnson. Of course, everyone who follows this Suns team is going to love Cameron Johnson. But admitting in a post-game interview after the best game of your career that some other player hurt you, I think shows like a level of vulnerability that's just kind of fascinating from an NBA player, just to say that hurt and what he did hurt. But not only that, Cameron Johnson also talked about a moment that happened when the Suns played the Knicks in New York City, where Julius Randle just kind of tackled Cameron Johnson, truthfully, from behind on a rebound, or really from the side, I guess, in a way that was completely unnecessary, and another physical moment for Cameron Johnson with Julius Randle, just implying that there was already some sort of history there, at the very least, on Cameron Johnson's side. I'm not sure that Julius Randle feels a certain way about Cameron Johnson. Maybe he does. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was clearly, in Cameron Johnson's mind, there was clearly some sort of history there.
First of all, to what you were talking about with Cam and his vulnerability, Cam Johnson, certainly an emotionally intelligent young man. I think he's very much of his generation, you could say. But I'm looking at the weight differences here. Cam is listed at 210 pounds. Julius Randle's listed at 250 pounds. It's gonna hurt.
Yeah,
It's a 40-pound difference. It's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
This is the downside of being a wing who has the short end of the stick, being, because we talk all the time about how the 3 and the 4 are interchangeable these days. Well, sometimes that's not true, because sometimes you're playing a team that actually plays a traditional 3 and a traditional 4, and in that case, you'd much rather be the 3 who gets to match up on a guy of your size than you would be the 4 who has to try and handle a guy 50 pounds greater or larger than you. And so Cam getting the short end of the stick in those situations, compared to, say, his twin Mikal Bridges, who typically doesn't have to deal with that, at least not as often.
That's an interesting thing to talk about when it comes to the Bucks too, which I think we'll get to in a second. But
a bit. If there's another storyline from this Knicks game, though, that we need to cover before we get to the Bucks, plenty to say about the Bucks. Yeah, it's Cameron Payne.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
It's not just this. It's not just this game. It's just these last few games that he has now played. The difference that Cameron Payne has made for this team immediately coming back has been so obvious. Like, it's just so present when you watch the Suns. The ability to get beyond the first line of the defense and to make the right passes. Cameron Payne is, of course, no Chris Paul. And I think that is also obvious when anyone plays point guard instead of Chris Paul, that nobody really is Chris Paul in the NBA today. He is a one and only player, but Cameron Payne is a true point guard and has the skill to play starting point guard in the NBA, and is now averaging over 10 assists in the games that he's played since then. I believe he's played 3 games. The Suns are 2-1 in those games, if I'm not mistaken. And, without Chris Paul, without Devin Booker, for the Suns to come out and destroy the Portland Trailblazers, first of all, remarkably, and then beat the Knicks the way that they did, and then, of course, the Bucks, they did not win. The Bucks are a really great team, and the Suns are missing 3 of their best players. I think it shows, the difference that Cameron Payne makes on this team. And it's just so great to have him back because he's so fun to watch, right?
He's so fun. I think people get down on Cam sometimes. They talk about, maybe not necessarily always playing with the pace that Chris Paul plays with. We talk about Chris Paul and we talk about how you can never speed him up. And I don't know. I mean, I think Cam's just done a really, really good job with that over the past week. Like, yes, sometimes the finishes, he's not going to finish necessarily at quite the same rate of, say, some of the most efficient guards in the NBA. In that Knicks game, for instance, took 16 shots and only made 6 of them. But to get a career-high 16 assists, the penetration, like you said, beyond the first line of defense, that's obvious. Aaron Holiday's not going to give it to you. Elfrid might give it to you, but he can't shoot, and he finishes even worse than Cam. Landry can't give it to you. The difference is just so obvious. And yeah, I've loved watching him tonight as well. He was really good. I guess we can transition over to the Bucks game now if you want. But he had 23 points tonight on 19 shots.
Well,
Only. Do you have something else you want to say about the Knicks first?
Well, not necessarily, but I want to talk about the Bucks, but let's just save that for the second half of the podcast.
That's fine. That's fine.
Because that's relevant, but I just want to quickly say, well, go ahead and finish your thoughts on Cameron Payne there.
Well, it's about the Bucks game, so if we're going to save it. We'll save it.
Because we have to talk about DeAndre Ayton. I think because DeAndre Ayton had, since the last time we spoke, one of the worst games he's played against in the last game, and then one of the better games I think he's played this season against the Bucks, and it's just been really interesting to watch DeAndre Ayton without Chris Paul. His shot profile is different. I mean, truthfully, he's just taking different kinds of shots with and without Chris Paul in the lineup, and I think there's got to be some element of him trying to figure it out a little bit, whether it be with Cameron Payne or if he's sharing the floor with Aaron Holiday, but he's still incredibly efficient. But I just think with DeAndre Ayton, when he has a bad game, which against the Knicks he had a bad game, it's never really just about the scoring. It stands out so much more, I think, than when other players have bad games. Devin Booker, for example, a lot of turnovers when he has a bad game, that stands out. But oftentimes with Devin Booker, he takes a lot of the same shots he's normally taking when he has a good game. They're just not dropping, and that results in a bad game. So in a sense, the process looks exactly the same from a good game to a bad game with him sometimes. Whereas with DeAndre Ayton, it's just not boxing out. It's not sealing properly. It's not giving a second effort on defense. It's just there's so many things that can happen that mount up to it being incredibly frustrating. And of course, he comes back and he has a great game with Milwaukee, which at this point, I think with DeAndre Ayton, that's something that you can just expect, right? Like, he has a bad game. He's probably going to come out and play really well in the next game. And of course, he did. But what are your thoughts on that stretch from DeAndre Ayton?
Well, first of all, just to address what you just said, it's a well-demonstrated fact at this point, I think, from... At one time, we called him our official Suns history correspondent. He's not in that role anymore, but still Cody Hunt on Twitter, who occasionally writes and does a great job in general. A well-documented fact from him, I remember he wrote an article last year that Ayton always does great in bounce-back performances. Mm-hmm. The games after he has, and I know, again, we talk about how it's not all about scoring, but these games where he seems to disappoint everyone on both ends of the spectrum, right? Both the people who notice the little things, the lack of effort, the defensive kind of second chances, the maybe poor sealing or screening, just the little things. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the other people who will just notice when he has, for instance, if he has 6 or 8 points, regardless of all the other stuff, if he has 6 points and 3 rebounds, everyone's going to notice that. Everyone's going to consider that a bad game.
Yeah.
So when he has those sorts of games, he's bounced back typically very, very well, both from a statistical standpoint, which is what Cody has demonstrated, also from an effort standpoint. And I was not at all surprised to see him bounce back today. I'll be honest, I didn't expect him to play this well today, for sure. I mean, without Chris Paul, it's just like you said, I know the shot profile is different. 30 points, 8 rebounds. I didn't expect that level of bounce back. Yeah,
right. We talked about it on our last time you and I spoke. I don't remember if it was Patreon or last episode, but the possibility of DeAndre in getting 30, which he did in this game. We talked about how Chris Paul affects that and how it's not always guaranteed that just because Chris Paul is out means Ayton's going to get 30. And I think we saw that, right? 6 points in one game, 30 points in the next. It's not a guarantee. But I think for it to happen for him, it's going to look a lot like it did in this Bucks game, which means occasionally catching it away from the basket. Maybe a 3, which he had in this game, is 3 for 4 since All-Star break from 3-point line, by the way. And those floaters, I think those floaters that are oftentimes in the paint but not in the restricted area, I think that's going to be a huge part of his game, because I just think it's a little bit harder for Cameron Payne to thread that needle to him when he's posted up away from the ball than it is for him to get it to him in that mid-range area when he's like hard attacking the basket the way that he does, compared to Chris Paul, who will snake and sort of be in that mid-range area, which gives DeAndre Ayton room at the rim. So that floater is going to be really important to him. And look, he's just so efficient right now. It's just kind of crazy. Here's an example. Outside of the restricted area in the paint since the All-Star break, he's 15 of 20, making 75% of his shots in that area. That means that could get up to like a 13, 14-foot shot, and it's just going in every single time. And it's just, his offense has been great. I think, yes, that Knicks game I think was frustrating, but I think you just give guys, that happens sometimes. You just got to give guys games like that occasionally. And I just want to point out that, yes, I understand why it's frustrating for Ayton, because it just stands out. It's just such a bright mistake of a game at times when he plays like that. And, if you want to talk about Ayton having a bad game, feel free to talk about that. I think you should be able to talk about that. I do think it's funny when people get defensive and say, why aren't you bringing up every other bad game that every other player has played just because you want to talk about Ayton having a bad game? But it's nice to see him bounce back and play really well against the Bucks, who really, he's just kind of dominated against so far. Super
quickly on that. I sometimes I got to choose my words carefully here. I don't understand how the discourse online, and maybe it's a sign that, like I'm following too many people. Sometimes it's a thing where you're too online, and that's definitely a criticism I've had of myself in the past. So maybe this is a case of that. I just don't understand how the discourse became so toxic in a game that they won. Yeah, granted, it took the Cam Johnson hero ball at the end, but I just, a team that was 51-12 after that game, and the fact that performance took up like a large percentage of what I was seeing after the game, I thought was really unfortunate. Again, I'm not one of those toxic positive people. I actually hate those toxic positive people who demands you to only say good things all the time about the team. I absolutely think you should be able to criticize Ayton, and I think the energy was off in that game. But kind of the grand sweeping debates that were being unleashed that we've seen time and time again, to be circling around that conversation, choosing that time to do it again, it was a little bit strange to me. It was a little bit odd.
You know what it might be? I'm going to try and make some sort of connection here. Cameron Johnson being this good makes the Suns' offseason interesting.
Yeah.
It really does. Right. It really does, because here's the reality of it. The Suns can sign an extension for Cameron Johnson and sign DeAndre into a max this offseason. And next year, it doesn't really matter because Cameron Johnson has another year on his rookie deal. The year after that, when DeAndre Ayton's going to be on a max contract, Devin Booker is going to be on a max contract. DeAndre Ayton technically will have a bigger max contract if it's a max than Devin Booker. Chris Paul is going to be making whatever 30-something million because he'll still be under contract. And then whatever Cameron Johnson signed kicks in, I doubt the Suns are going to do that. I doubt they're going to do that. I really do. Just based on everything we know about Robert Sarver, that would be a surprise. So while this is not necessarily a problem as early as next year, it is something that the Suns could look to solve earlier, and that's as early as this offseason. And I think that's going to result in some arguments online, whether or not that's fair to anyone involved here. I just think that's something that could happen. And I don't really want to spend a lot of time talking about that, but I guess I kind of understand where the line is being drawn for some people. And I don't know. I don't really want to be a part of it, I guess.
Yeah, some people worry too much. I don't know. We'll cross that bridge.
It's a problem for later, yeah.
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I'm totally prepared to have that discussion when we need to, because eventually we'll have to address it. And I'll be honest, I share a lot of the same fears and reservations that you do about this front office, and especially if leadership does not change and its willingness to invest in roster personnel. Let's just say that. But, we're talking about a best-case scenario season right now, like a best-case scenario season. And if some of y'all are complaining after a game like that, I shudder to think what the discourse would be right now if this was, say, like, I don't know, like a 35-25 team or something. You know what I mean? Like, just imagine. So, relish this while you can. Again, I know we already kind of finished talking about that Knicks game and wrapping it up and everything, but like that was to go into that game with Not really, in my opinion. Like, I didn't even really have expectations of winning that one necessarily. I wanted to win it, but I would have, if they had dropped that game, that wouldn't have been the end of the world to me either. And that was one of the most, maybe the most fun I've had as a Suns fan watching a game this entire regular season. Just try to embrace the magic of minutes like that.
Yeah. All I'll say is Jam Najafi's a billionaire. We'll be right back. Let's talk more about the Bucks, because I think the Bucks conversation is one of those conversations that's going to be really important for the potential finals rematch that could happen. So we'll be right back and we'll talk more about that.
Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
Okay, Sam, the Suns are now, 51-13. So they've played 64 games. That leaves 18 games left. They're now 3-3 since Chris Paul went out. If they go 500 the rest of the way, that's a 60-win season still.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a 60-win season. If they go slightly above 500, they could have the best Suns season ever still. That's within reach. But do you have any fear? The Warriors now have been losing a lot lately. Do you have any fear of anyone catching the Suns at this point, or are we just good to go?
Yeah, I think we're good to go. That's assuming I really want Devin Booker back this week. I think he will be back at some point this week. The Suns play the Magic on Tuesday, but afterwards they have some tough opponents coming up if you look at the schedule. So they're going to need Devin Booker back if they want to be competitive in some of these games, frankly. It was awesome to see what they did against the Bucks today, but they need Booker back. That being said, with the Warriors floundering to this extent and Memphis taking control of the second seed, I think you're pretty safe in first place.
They did say in the broadcast of this game that the Suns expect to have Devin Booker back by Tuesday or Wednesday. Mm-hmm. But that's not guaranteed. That when it comes to COVID, you have to have negative tests.
And even if
within a 24-hour period,
even if Booker's back, frankly, like Cam Johnson plus CP3 is still a big loss. So you want to get both of those guys back, not CP3 obviously, but you would like to get the other two back sometime this week, and then you're kind of rolling again at that point. You feel pretty good.
Yeah, we haven't really even seen Cameron Payne and Devin Booker. Like the combination of Cameron Payne, Devin Booker, and Cameron Johnson playing the way he is, the Suns could legitimately set the record for the best regular season record for the Phoenix Suns of all time if all of those guys are healthy, even if Chris Paul doesn't come back until the playoffs. So I just wanted to briefly touch on that for anyone who is concerned with the playoff race at this point. I think you could feel pretty good about it. So now we have seen the Suns play the Bucks twice this season, right? We haven't seen 3 games, have we?
Twice. Eastern Conference opponent, so only twice.
Once at home, Suns healthy, Bucks relatively healthy, and the Suns ran away with that one.
Blowout.
Yeah, blowout, 30-point game or whatever it ended up being. And then this game without Cameron Johnson, without Chris Paul, without Devin Booker, ended up being a 10-point victory for the Milwaukee Bucks. It took 44 points on a lot of difficult shots from Chris Middleton, who had an excellent game, continues to have excellent games against the Suns, even in a season where he's struggled.
Let's just say also it took about 46 of those 48 minutes before they really ran away with it to make it a 10-point game. Until about the 46-minute mark, it was a 2-point game. So,
yeah, and the Bucks, Look, if you look at their record recently, you definitely make the case that Brook Lopez was important to them. I think that Brook Lopez definitely was important to them. They now have Serge Ibaka in that role, and they're playing well, but not as well as they were last year. And yeah, you had some. Let's start here. You had some thoughts on Cameron Payne and how he was playing against the Bucks. I'd like to hear what you were going to talk about when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, Campaign, he was really good tonight. Honestly, I was going to, I hate to do this actually because I have a greater point that I want to make sure we hit on eventually because I think it's more important ultimately to a series. To just address the Campaign thing, he took 19 shots tonight was what I was going to say earlier. Scored 23 points, 8 assists, had a good game. Really felt his penetration, right? Only 2 free throws. I hate to be this guy. I really try hard not to be this guy typically, but I think it's important to bring it up in this case because when even the head coach is talking about it, there's a free throw disparity between the Suns and the Bucks tonight. 29 free throw attempts for the Bucks, 11 for the Suns. And I think specifically the plays where you felt it were on some drives from Campaign, some drives from Landry Shamet, where they were being principally guarded by Drew Holiday most of the times. In other cases, some other players like Grayson Allen, whatnot. But that's where you felt a difference in how the game was being called. I don't think this was like the only reason that made the difference between the two teams, but Monty Williams addressed this after the game. He complained about the officiating, which is something he typically doesn't do. Let me see if I can
almost never.
Do you have
maybe this is the second time?
Do you have the exact quote on you, or actually I have it here? He said, it was from Gerald, our buddy Gerald Bourguet, at Gerald Bourguet on Twitter. He said, quote, "The pattern that we're having to deal with from a free throw perspective is just getting old," from Monty Williams. He also noted that the Bucks hit a lot of tough shots, but he reiterated multiple times how frustrating the free throw discrepancy is every time these two teams play. He also mentioned the Suns need to be better about keeping teams off the offensive glass. That's a huge issue that we could talk about for sure, Mike. But he pointed out the 29-11 free throw discrepancy, despite Phoenix only having one fewer shot in the paint in this game against the Bucks. So in relation to Payne, I think there's other things we could talk about too that are going to be honestly more impactful over a full 7-game series. What did you think about the officiating tonight? I'll give you the floor.
I'll be honest. I think that there was only a few calls or non-calls that bothered me. I don't think it was like overly jarring. Specifically there was a Landry Shamet drive where he was getting hit and bouncing around.
Well, and here's what I'll just quickly say, because I said this on Twitter too. If you give me another 7-game series between the Suns and the Bucks, I know how shot frequencies work. I look at team shot charts. I know that if you're attacking the paint, you're going to get more free throws than if you're shooting floaters and taking 16-foot mid-range jump shots. So I fully am willing to admit that the Bucks deserve, and this is true, they deserve on average to take more free throws than the Suns because they take more shots right at the rim. 29-11, though, that's not that much of a discrepancy if you look at the team's shot frequencies, and that's where I think it started to fall apart a little bit in this game. But I agree. It's not like just because it was 29-11 doesn't mean it should be 29-29 in order for it to be a fair game, or 11-11.
Yeah.
But
maybe 29-15 though, half as many free throws instead of basically a third. Yeah,
I understood Monty's frustration, and especially in a game where it comes down to a couple possessions like this, every point counts.
Yeah, I think it does. So yeah, there's a few of those. I think in general, Cameron Payne. Look, the reality of it in this game in particular is that stars tend to get the whistle, and the Suns played without any stars. I mean, DeAndre Ayton is what he is. But he's definitely not officiated like a star.
No,
that's for sure. And the Bucks played with 3 stars, really, and that's just that's kind of how it goes. Like, because I'll just say it about Cameron Payne in general, he does not get a good whistle. Ends up on the floor in a lot of his drives, which at times affects the Suns negatively. But he doesn't get that whistle. Often doesn't get that whistle, so it hurts and it sucks. But in this particular game, I think that Monty is bringing it up to affect any sort of potential future meeting of these two teams, right, so that the refs have a little bit more of an eye on it. Because I think it's the right thing to say for him. And you mentioned it. He rarely ever does this. Almost never.
Yeah, he's done it. He's done it, I think, once before. But he's willing to eat the fine to get in their ear. I want to talk about what I think my biggest takeaway is from the first two games, and I think it relates to something nicely, actually, that I know you've been talking about too. So these two teams split these two games. Obviously, we have to draw a line in the sand somewhere of what exactly the difference is between these two teams compared to last year.
Context matters. Yeah.
To convince maybe some of the people, whether they're in the national media landscape or even local fans, who maybe not have been watching as closely, who knows? Because if you're not paying close attention, I think it would be easy to just say, oh, these are the same two teams as last year. And after watching these two games, it's very clear to me, yes, 70-80% of the players on the rosters are technically the same, but in no way are these the same two teams stylistically. And actually, like I talked about this game at the very beginning of the episode, just being riveting is the word I would use to describe it again. Like, again, I thought it was a really great, honestly, coaching battle between Monty Williams and Budenholzer today. And I thought the fourth quarter of this game with the difficult shot making was so riveting that, Mike, I had to pee the entire fourth quarter and I just could not. I literally, I was glued to my screen even through the commercial breaks because I thought the basketball product that we were watching, even regardless of the Suns' loss, was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And I think if we got a finals rematch here, some people will disagree with this take. They'll bring up ratings, yada, yada, yada. But I think it would be great for the league because I think it's two really, really excellent basketball teams. Here's the biggest takeaway. Tell me what you think of this. Giannis Antetokounmpo in his two games versus Phoenix this season, I tweeted this out right after the game, is averaging 18.5 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, and 3 turnovers per game on 48% shooting from the field, 0% from three because he hasn't hit a three, and 55% shooting from the free throw line. Chris Middleton just scored 44 in a game. Drew Holiday has been the Bucks' second best player this year and has proven at times that he can absolutely clearly step up. So it's not as simple as take Giannis out of the game, win the series. But for a variety of reasons, the Suns have found much better ways of containing the two-time MVP in their two matchups this season. And obviously that's like the biggest thing, right? There's a number of reasons there, but I know you actually clipped, I thought, a couple of really good clips with explanations of how the Suns were guarding Giannis in this game specifically. Would you like to talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a few plays, and they did it in the first and second half, I noticed, where the thing about the Bucks that makes them so difficult, and this is another point about the importance of Brook Lopez, and if he comes back, even if he's not himself, I think it makes a difference to even them getting out of the East. But they play Giannis and they play a center, and that means that Giannis has another big guy on the floor that can help him rebound, and often those guys can shoot threes. That's Bobby Portis, that's Serge Ibaka, whoever they end up playing with him. Those guys are essentially centers on any other team. With Giannis in there, of course, it makes it hard. The Suns play one big, and at times they do play two bigs against this team, which we can talk about in a second. But when they play one big, that means that if Ayton is on Giannis, the Suns probably are giving up some rebounds in that scenario. So what they've been doing in this game is they will start with some wings on the perimeter, and when Giannis is in the initial action for pick and rolls, they're switching on those pick and rolls. And this is something I didn't include in the video, but this is an important point to make. They're switching on those pick and rolls to try and stop any easy pick and roll dunks for Giannis when he's playing off the ball. And then they're fronting Giannis because there's a smaller guy on Giannis. Giannis is going to immediately try to post up against that play or get the ball to face up against that player because it's a smaller player. When the wings are fronting, that's Mikal Bridges, that's Jay Crowder, making the pass over the top as difficult as possible. Lob passes are the slowest passes, and that means the Suns have time to bring DeAndre and back into the fold, who's essentially kind of playing in the middle of a zone and on the guy that he's on in that scenario. And that allows him to run up and play the initial on-ball defense there. Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, two of the smartest defenders in the NBA. Mm-hmm. They will find the right guys to help out on in those scenarios so that Giannis doesn't have any easy passes. And I thought that was a fascinating way to do it because that's essentially just guarding the pass with one guy and then guarding the on-ball action with another. So to not let him have the strength advantage once he has the ball in his hands. And I just thought that was fascinating. They didn't do that every time, right? That's just one of the looks they're giving Giannis in this game.
Yeah.
And, at times it worked, at times it didn't. Most of the time, I'll be honest, that specific action did work in that he either had a difficult isolation or just passed out of it. which I think made a big difference for the Suns.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to give Ayton credit for there is you talked about how he's playing in that zone, and when he's in that position where the wing is fronting Giannis and Ayton is just dropping back at the rim, he's really like playing that kind of free safety in a basketball version role, where the thing that's so difficult about that is he has to, they call it 2-9ing, the concept of avoiding a 3-second defensive 3-second violation, which means you have to continually be standing underneath the basket but then resetting, putting both feet outside of the paint to avoid that violation. I think this is really one of the biggest differences in little things that you can see in DeAndre Ayton in terms of having confidence in his team defensive ability now versus what he would have been able to manage 2 years ago. Because I can't imagine 2 years ago Ayton would have been able to handle kind of that internal clock running in his head versus knowing exactly when to kind of lurch out at Giannis and be able to double him at precisely the right moment, while also allowing the other three defenders, right? Because if Ayton is down low and you've got a wing fronting, then that means you've got another three defenders on the other side of the court who are having to zone up kind of against the four other Milwaukee Bucks offensive players. So everyone is constantly shifting in motion. The truth is with that whole 2-9ing concept, the Bucks were able to abuse it a couple of times in this game. They were able to wait until precisely the moment where Ayton was resetting his feet outside of the paint, and okay, that's when you pass to Giannis. By the time Ayton gets there, it's too late, and he's already at the rim. But the difference between the couple of breakdowns at most that I counted in this game versus how many I think there would have been if you tried this earlier in his career was massive. And I think his ability to take up space like that in a way where he plays straight up defense and does not foul. This was another game where DeAndre Ayton played a full game, finished with only 2 fouls with Giannis as his primary assignment. That's remarkable, and that should give you a lot of confidence about how you're able to guard Giannis in a finals rematch. But again, like you said, that's less than half the equation here, because they were using that kind of as a primary look on Giannis with their starters, but then you've got Bismack Biyombo and JaVale McGee. And that's a huge difference.
Who now play together, apparently.
They played together. And
it works on defense.
Let's be honest. It was weird offensively, and it didn't work offensively. But it absolutely worked defensively. You had JaVale play a little bit with Ayton. You had Bismack play a little bit with Ayton. I think the key there is short spurts. You can't keep it running offensively for too long before it starts to fall apart. Maybe that would be different with Chris Paul, who knows, or Devin Booker, but at least with the guys you had on the court today, that absolutely did not work offensively for long stretches. But like, it works. You can see the length on the court, and you can see the way that it physically bothered the Bucks and stopped them from getting into their offense early in the shot clock. Bismack Biyombo defensively was terrific. He had multiple steals playing up in the pick and roll early in the game in the first half. He did a really, really good job. And you watch those two guys, him and JaVale, just such a clear, obvious difference between what they are versus what you had in Dario and Frank in the finals last season. So between being able to bother them with the length of those two versus also being able to fall back on your one big lineups where it's just Ayton, and like we were talking about, you kind of have the wings harass them instead, the Suns have a lot of options defensively to go at Giannis. And Giannis is an amazing player. He will adjust eventually. But through these 2 games, just the way you're guarding him and taking him out of the game has been really impressive. Yeah,
and it's actually very similar to what the Warriors do with Draymond Green. It's kind of what the Suns are doing with DeAndre Ayton, in that at times when Giannis has the ball, if there's still a wing on him, which the Suns did play even possessions when Giannis had the ball with Jay Crowder, or occasionally Mikal Bridges, but mostly Jay Crowder, Ayton essentially plays a zone. Like, he'll just start guarding the rim, and the rest of the Suns players have to kind of zone out too. I guess you could call it a Bucks in one. I don't know if that's necessarily what it is in this scenario, but that allows Ayton to be the primary roaming help defender at the paint to help out, or JaVale McGee, I guess, is another guy who was doing it. And the Suns are so good at communicating in those scenarios. Like, I want to even just give credit specifically to Landry Shamet, who had another good game, or one of his first good games in a while, 17 points on 14 shots, and did well with assists. He had 5 assists overall, and I thought he was pretty good in this game overall. But I also think that when you watch what the Suns are doing defensively, Landry Shamet does a really good job of Xing out. And once again, for those who are wondering what Xing out means, that's essentially when a help defender comes off a shooter. Say there's a shooter in the corner and a shooter at the wing. Landry Shamet's guarding the shooter at the wing. The help defender comes off the corner. Landry Shamet has to sort of drift between those two shooters at the three-point line to ensure that if the pass goes out to either one, he's equidistant between those two guys and able to properly defend whoever catches the ball. And he does a good job, and the whole Suns team does a good job. And this Bucks team is such a great example. You said it earlier, of a coaching battle between two coaches, in that any mistake on that specific thing, Xing out in that scenario, leads to a wide open three. Because the Bucks are so good, and they have so many smart players that they will take advantage of it, and they did at times in this game, of course. But the Suns are really good at finding ways to guard multiple guys in that scenario with the guys out in the perimeter, as well as basically shrink the court in the middle of the floor to make sure that Giannis has no easy lanes to the basket. And look, I'll say this about Giannis too. The Suns have done well defending him in the regular season games this season. There's no guarantee that any of that will translate to the playoffs when everything is sort of set and the opponents are set. But it does make me feel a little better that the Suns they've clearly thought a lot about it. They have a lot of different ways to attack him. They have different guys they're going to throw at him. And I think it's going to be fascinating if they meet again.
Another thing that I think we need to address when it comes to the Bucks is just, we talked about the Suns being a little bit different. The Bucks roster is different, and they miss Brook Lopez. I think you addressed that earlier. They also miss PJ Tucker, and they miss Pat. They miss Pat Connaughton as well.
Who could be back? Yeah.
Who could be back? Yes, could be back for the finals. But especially in this game was very clear, and they never tried to replace or are trying to replace Brook with Serge. I don't think it's quite the same. I thought Serge played well in this game, but I don't think it's quite the same.
Defense. Brook Lopez is a really great defender.
Yes, absolutely. They never gave an honest chance or an honest try at replacing PJ, and I really think it's going to hurt them. And I think you look at the difference between PJ played 30 minutes per game in the finals last year. Connaughton, who again could be back, but he also played like 30 minutes per game in the finals this year. If you replace those guys with Grayson Allen this year, which is kind of looking like what it's shaping up to be, I don't really see it. He's not a bad player. I think it's very easy to shit on Grayson Allen because he's, kind of a terrible person on the basketball court, at least.
Yeah.
But no, just in terms of his basketball ability, is much, much lighter than either of those guys.
The scariest thing about Grayson Allen is what sort of reckless play
yes.
he's going to do
for sure.
in any individual game.
But I'm imagining, if Grayson Allen's going to be a 25 to 30 minute per game guy for them in the playoffs, I'm salivating at the idea of, first of all, CP can easily hide on him on defense. That's not an issue whatsoever. And offensively, that's a matchup they like. Book's going to get that switch. They're going to find a way to target him. It's not going to be to the extent of a Michael Porter Jr. or a Luke Kennard. He's not like that. But that's a matchup they like, I'll tell you right now. And it's definitely a big gap between that versus the PJ Tucker matchup last year, which I don't think the Suns ever really successfully exploited in that series.
Yeah. Not to mention his ability to get offensive rebounds from wherever he was on the court. He was just one of those guys that can hunt down the ball. So we got the Bucks. Right, the Nets just lost to the Sixers. Again, the Nets are still in sort of a free... I'm sorry, the Nets lost to the Celtics. The Nets are still in sort of a free fall. They literally are within striking distance of being out of the play-in. How funny would it be, by the way, if both the Lakers and the Nets don't even make the play-in tournament,
Hilarious.
which is on the table.
It's
literally on the table. It would take Washington to be good, so it's not likely. But so we got the Nets. Okay, the Celtics are on a tear. The Celtics are really good lately. The Bulls are still the Bulls. The Bulls will be healthier by the time the playoffs come. And then, of course, there's the 76ers. The 76ers now are very good. They have James Harden. They have the leading, probably, MVP candidate so far this season, along with a former MVP in James Harden. Do you still think the Bucks, it's assuming the Suns make the finals, which is, of course, in no way guaranteed.
Yeah.
But if they are there, do you still think the Bucks are the most likely opponent for them?
Man, I don't think that anyone on this planet could give you like
Yeah.
a truly confident answer at this point.
And I didn't even mention the Heat, who the Suns are playing soon. But
The Heat, and
the
by
best
the way,
coach, and just keep winning.
who the Suns are going to play on a back-to-back,
Wednesday.
likely shorthanded. It would be really nice if they won that game because they lost. The Heat kicked our ass earlier in the season, so it would be really nice to build some confidence by beating them. I'm not super high on their ability to do that this particular week just because of circumstances, so we'll see. It's going to be a bloodbath. There's no way around it. The Eastern Conference playoffs is going to be a bloodbath, and potentially, if everything works out kind of in the NBA's favor, could be an all-time great playoffs, at least on that side of the bracket, because some of the potential matchups that you have there are just amazing. I'll say the Bucks, as a specific matchup for the Suns, are still one of the teams that I fear the most, if not maybe the team that I fear the most, because I think they've got the combination of continuity, of top-level talent, and shot making, as well as defensive ability. They're not without flaws, but they kind of have it all, and they're vetted in a way that some of these other teams aren't vetted. That being said, Miami's right there with them. Philly's right there with them. Boston's a fun story. I mean, I don't really...
and they're killing teams.
I know. I still don't really believe it in my heart of hearts.
It's weird. Yeah, it's hard, man.
I still don't really believe it in my heart of hearts, but they're a fun story. Chicago's a fun story. They're another team. I don't really believe it in my heart of hearts. They feel more like a conference finals team to me than a finals team. But who knows?
Yeah, the Celtics in particular, it feels a little, I don't know. I want to say that it feels kind of gimmicky because one of the main changes they made was putting Robert Williams on wings, which I think, I don't know. Like, is that going to be sustainable in the playoffs against some of the best wings in the NBA? Or is that something that can only work in the regular season when people aren't game planning and preparing for it in the same way that they would in the playoffs? But they still have Tatum, who's, on an MVP like tear. He's not going to win it, but like that's how good he's been playing lately. And of course, Jaylen Brown, and Derek White's pretty good. They have Marcus Smart. Like, they got a lot of players on that team, and still Al Horford, who's playing relatively well. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating playoffs. But yeah, that I think I would say the Bucks are still the most likely opponent, but like nothing is guaranteed in that playoffs.
Yeah, and I will say I think the Bucks are the team that give me the most pause as a Suns fan, and yet how the Suns have played the season series this year against the Bucks gives me a lot more confidence in that matchup than I'll just be honest, than I had 6 months ago when the Suns finished their entire offseason was picking up JaVale McGee and trading a first-round pick for Landry Shamet. I was iffy about whether that truly addressed the needs that the stuff they really needed to beat the Bucks in a rematch. But now that I've seen, those guys, obviously they make a difference, but now that they've picked up, they reacquired Torrey Craig, and Aaron Holiday has been good. They picked up Bismack Biyombo, who's been fantastic. Yeah, and they've gotten the absolute required internal development out of a few of the supporting cast pieces. DeAndre Ayton's hook shot, Jay Crowder's floater, Cam Johnson's willingness to drive to the basket, Mikal Bridges' mid-range jumper. There are skills that these guys have beyond just the number 1 and 2 in Chris Paul and Devin Booker, where there were games in the finals where the Suns couldn't score more than 80 points, and I feel much more confident about that not happening this year if they were a rematch.
Yeah, so. I agree. I think I agree, although you never know. We'll see how the Bucks are playing by the time the playoffs start. I'd want to give a quick shout out to the passing of Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder. In these last few games, Mikal Bridges still averaging 4 assists a game. Jay Crowder, 3.5 assists. We'll get to Aaron Holiday more later since we're already rounding out to about an hour here, but Aaron Holiday has also been good. Do you have anything else you'd like to jam in, excuse me, at the end of this podcast?
No, I think judging from your throat's reaction right there, we're all set for this week. It's going to be another tough week. Let me just pull up the schedule real quick. I know
Orlando. We're doing the Florida trip. Right?
Okay,
so it's Orlando, Miami, and then Toronto on Friday. The other Florida team last year was Toronto. But yeah, that is a tough week. You're absolutely right. Orlando, I think, is obviously the easiest game there, and the Suns should be favored in that game.
Totally.
Even without the players that, maybe Devin Booker plays, maybe he doesn't. But if Cameron Johnson's back, I think they're favored. If Cameron Johnson's not back, maybe it's pretty close.
But Toronto's
Miami
pesky.
on the second night of a back-to-back, even with Devin Booker, I don't know. Like, that's a Miami Heat favored game there.
And Toronto's
and then Toronto,
pesky.
yes. You never know with Toronto. Yeah.
Toronto has always played the Suns, at least for the current iteration of Toronto for the past few years. They've always played the Suns really well.
A smart coach, a bunch of long guys that play on that team. So, yeah, that's a tough one. But, of course, we will be back with another Patreon episode, likely after the Miami Heat game. If you'd like additional content from us, sign up at patreon.com/thetimeline. That includes watch parties for the Toronto game this Friday and the Chicago game next Friday. They have been incredibly fun. So if you'd like to join us for a watch party, just try one. You could try one for $3 and sign up on our Patreon and check one of them out if you're watching at home. But we appreciate you guys, and we will be back very soon.
Get the rebound. Get the rebound.
You just gotta focus.
Get the ball. Oh! No way! No way! Oh my God! Oh! Stop it right now! Oh, Cam Johnson!
He get it off? Did he get it off?
Yes,
Did he get it off?
He got it off, guys.
Oh my
God! No defining way! Oh my Johnson! Oh my God!
Oh my God. For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.